So this afternoon I'm heading out for some location scouting. It's an important part of my process as a wildlife photographer, but equally a bloody good excuse to get away from my desk that I feel like I've spent way too much time at over the last couple of weeks. With the deadlines for the Wildlife Photographer of the Year, client images to send out and a boatload of video editing, I really have been chained to my screen. And even though the weather might be a bit ropey and it's rather dull, it really is just good to be outside. My plan is to find a viewpoint where I can settle in and watch the wildlife. I've got my binoculars and my scope today to help scan the scene. The latter really excels for this type of work, with the increased magnification offering me great views but also increased range to pick out movement at a distance. Obviously, when I'm generally out with the camera, the scope's the first thing to go. The additional weight is something I don't usually want to carry, but for days like today when I'm sat scouting a new location, it really comes into its own. On the mention of cameras, I don't really have much with me. If I'm honest, with the weather conditions, lack of light and just dull scene as it is, I'm fairly confident it won't be an image producing day. But just in case, I have thrown my 300 f4 in the bag, just on the off chance that I can add it to my filming camera, because well, sometimes you never know. From experience, however, and the reason I'm doing this today is to get out for a better understanding of my local patch. Having been down in Cornwall for just over a year now, and a lot of that time having been away from home, I haven't had too much opportunity to get out and really understand the wildlife in my local area, and so today, sat here watching through the scope, is a perfect chance to get to know it a little better. You know, there's so many good opportunities down here, interesting new subjects to approach, but in order to make images that I'm really excited about, I need to understand where I need to position myself, how to get there and get the camera in the right location to make the type of images I want. Something that's even more important to understand if I'm going to use remote cameras or camera traps, where I need to predict every aspect of the animal's behaviour to get that perfect image. For long scouting sessions, comfort is something that's really important, so it's really good to take time to get settled in, positioning the scope at that perfect height. And over the years, having spent many hours with a wet bum, I must admit a ground seat is a luxury I do love to have with me these days. Clothing is also vital, and as you can see, I'm popping my shell smock here, having been sat down for a while. I never want to walk in with all my clothes on. You get hot, sweaty, perspire underneath, and the moment that you sit down and are stationary, that starts to cool and make you cold. It's always best to, be bold, start cold, and then build up those layers once you've got rid of any perspiration and you're settled into view. You'll be much warmer in the long term. With everything set up, feeling warm and comfortable, well, it's time to get my eye to the scope and see what I can find. Sat quietly scanning the beach, I've seen oyster catchers, ring plover, turnstone picking their way through the pebbles, dunlin and sandling flying along the edge of the coast, as well as a number of gulls overhead. Down past the headland, I've even spotted a chough that's a bird I'm really keen to get closer and photograph whilst I'm down here in Cornwall. With a bit of patience, it's amazing what will show itself. 1 minute you're scanning an area and you can't see anything. 2 seconds later you look back and there's a curlew flying in from the coast to join that group of oyster catchers that you'd already seen. It's moments like this that the scope really proves its power. Location scouting, like all things in wildlife photography, is largely about patience. Just waiting and watching and seeing where the animals move. The whole point of this process is to get an understanding of where the wildlife likes to be in an environment. As the tide's coming in, which rocks do the waders tend to roost on? Are there any really obvious ones that they go back to time and time again? These are places that I can log in my memory and remember to get back to next time. I can then find the right photographic angle to work from, meaning that I'm not wasting my time on a photographic shoot day. Of course, I can already tell that this is going to be a morning location with the cliffs behind me and the light dropping low. I'm not going to get that last hour of the day to really illuminate the birds. It's going to be far more a morning situation to get the perfect shots. But just watching and waiting is going to give you this information, and I urge every photographer to get out and do it. You might think, oh, I don't want to waste the time not having the camera in my hand, but understanding where you are and where you need to be to actually make the pictures is information that's going to drastically improve your chances of ever coming back with those shots that you really want to have in the portfolio. As it starts to get dull and my last opportunities for viewing wildlife draw near, I get lucky with some grey plover who fly into a rock fairly close by. The images that you're seeing here of the wildlife I'm filming through the scope, something that I've learned to do to kind of record details of where wildlife is so I can revisit it with the camera later. It's also really handy if you just want to show people some close-up viewings of some incredible animals that we're lucky to have on our coasts. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to see much more now, and with the rain coming a little bit harder and it really starting to get dark, it's probably time to move. I also know that the beach gets cut off at really high tide, and I don't necessarily want to wading up to my boxers to get home. As the night draws in, it's time to leave the beach, and this is one I'll certainly come back to, probably in the morning, and probably with a lot more knowledge of where I want to be to make those perfect pictures.